if you really look into yourself and what you believe in, what your values are, what you love doing, you can find your niche that way.
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vella Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vella Williamson.
Hello and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vella Williamson. This season, our focus is on the future of mass communication. Today, I'm joined by April Monterrosa. April is the publisher of Live from the South Side and a radio personality at KLMO 98.9 FM. She is also a Texas Legislator honoree and recipient of the President's Lifetime Achievement Award. Welcome, April.
Hi, thank you, Melissa. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, I'm so excited. You're so generous with your time and your engagement and elevation of the community. So I definitely wanted to hear your point of view on where we're going with mass communication these days. So tell us more about your background and your career focus these days.
So my background, what a lot of people do not know, is I grew up in entrepreneur life since I was 8 years old. My parents had a contracting company. And then I got into the beauty career. I was in corporate America in the luxury spa industry for quite some time. That led me to entrepreneur life of my own. So I had my own spa business for about 12 years. And between launching my own business in the beauty world and till now is when my media career blossomed. Today, I am in the media world, and I mentioned I'm the publisher of Live from the Southside magazine. And my journey from entrepreneur life, the spa industry kind of led her. So now I get to tell stories about my Southside and San Antonio communities.
That's really great. And I love how very naturally you grew up in entrepreneurship. And so that really, I think, sets the tone for having the right mindset around it, that it is possible, number one. And number two, it's probably always going to be challenging. But when it's your own challenge, April, there's something just so much more satisfying about that. And I love how you
Absolutely.
kind of stacked your abilities together and said, okay, I've done this and I've done this. And it kind of led like stepping stones to what you're doing now. And that tells me a whole lot, because if any of my listeners look April up, she's beautiful. She always carries herself with a lot of grace, and her makeup and look is always on point. And so I can see you growing up in beauty, April. It makes a lot of sense. Well, let's get that insider's look at Live from the South Side. What inspired you to start the publication in particular?
My biggest inspiration was my travel writing. So my niche, when I was a travel blogger, and I was kind of doing that on the side during the time that I owned my spa business, I'm traveling all over Texas, and my niche was small Texas towns, highlighting all the positive stories of their communities and these fun places and fun things to do. So that inspired me, because at the time, you really didn't see too many positive things on the news or in major media about the South Side. So I started by highlighting my own people in my neighborhoods and the small businesses in the areas I grew up in. So that's really what inspired me to kind of shed some positive light on underserved Southside San Antonio community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we have our inspiration and then we have that business side, and you really intersected and put them together. But was there anything in particular that kind of told you like, okay, this is a good business idea as well as just something that our communities could benefit from?
I started getting asked by local businesses to advertise the platform. And this is pre-publication. And so I started kind of doing that. And it turned into a business that was not planned at all.
No, I understand. That makes a lot of sense. Something just kind of takes off and you realize, look, there is a business opportunity here. This went from, I don't know about you, April, but I'm always interested in starting these different passion projects. So something that maybe was more of a passion project to become, a real opportunity for yourself and others. So how has Live from the South Side really evolved since you first published it. What formats does it exist in now?
Well, now Life in the Southside is partnered with KSAT 12 News, SA Live, and KLMO 98.9 FM. Those partnerships help us get the word out on everything going on the South Side. And it's been such a great blessing. Not only are we sharing these great stories on Life in the South Side, but other media platforms are sharing as well. So that's been really, really cool to see. And I think the most emotional part of that is seeing my community that is typically not known, or small business owners that are not known, seeing them in news stories, that just does me every time. But Life in the Southside is on all social media platforms. It's a digital and print publication. So you can get it on our website. You can subscribe and receive it via email once a month. And then, of course, you can catch the links on our social media.
Okay, that's awesome. And can you tell from your readership if people are more interested in engaging with the digital publication? Is there still a big appetite for print?
Honestly, it's digital. Everyone is on their devices these days. My readership digitally just grows and grows and grows. And why I haven't committed to a regular print machine or print company, because first of all, it's, you're a business owner, it's very expensive. And the need and the demand for it is not like digital. My links get passed around. I mean, as you know, insights, you can keep track of all that. Our digital version is what gets the most hits for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the accessibility of the digital publication is such a great fit, particularly for an area as spread out as San Antonio. April's coming to us live from the South Side, but of San Antonio, and so you're from my city, my community. And I want to kind of underline for listeners too, who may not be from our area, that the South Side is a very proud, a very branded in some ways, April, part of the city. Describe the Southside community a little bit for our listeners if they're not from our area.
The South Side is very rich in culture. It is the only place in San Antonio where the San Antonio River runs wildly. We have our historic San Antonio missions. So it's kind of the birthplace of San Antonio. And yes, you're right. Southsiders are very proud. I don't care what part of the US I travel to and I meet someone from San Antonio. If you tell them you're from the South Side and they are too, it's like a long lost cousin. San Antonio is just very rich in culture, very family oriented. There's a lot of large families. We're closer to the wide open spaces, the more rural parts of San Antonio. And we're connected to a lot of very small towns like Poteet, Somerset, Lytle. So kind of get the mixture of big city life with country living.
Yeah, and I think that's where the cultures really kind of shift and overlap in some ways, right? Where you've got this mix of a lot of heritage coming from Mexican American background, indigenous background, but then definitely we have that Tejano and country aspect too, and particularly in the South Side, it kind of has its own flavor for sure. And then reminds me of Michelle Obama. One of the phrases I've heard her say often is that, I'm just a girl from the South Side of Chicago. And I was thinking about it the other day and I was like, it seems like most major cities, their South Side has a name. It's got its own brand and it's got its own culture and identity in that way. So I think that's pretty unique about the community. And the fact that you have these media partnerships that had been pretty non-traditional before really shows that mass communication is really moving into these segmented or specialty niche audiences. And so from your vantage point as a publisher, April, what is the advantage of focusing on a hyper-local or niche area of the city?
In my case, they're always looking for positive stories in my community. Now with the South Side, there's so much economic development. You see more of the positive stories on major media outlets, but it's more from that standpoint. And I'm very grassroots on the ground, and I get to highlight the things that people don't traditionally see because they're not here. Major media shares a lot of downtown, the Riverwalk, all the touristy spots. And I think sometimes the South Side's a little forgotten about. So I think that's been my advantage of my publication, that I'm here. I show up to events, family friendly, especially. We're very big on community and family. And just sharing those stories, it's kind of snowballed. I guarantee you that one story has like 12 primos as sharing the story too. So I think that's been my advantage, focusing on my community.
Yeah, I think so too. And what marketing terms would call grassroots is really that very natural, supportive engagement. Like this is where influencer came from. It's a community influencer. It wasn't someone, we put a camera in their hand and a badge on at an event. It was the person who knew what was going on, the person with the cheese man, the person with the updates, the person that most people liked or knew better not to hate too much and keep in their circle. So I think that's really important that you all highlight the human interest stories that, quite frankly, I'm seeing the major outlets letting go of. And the race for the clicks, and unfortunately, a lot of articles and stories that get clicks are going to be more sensational, more deviant, more novel in terms of newsworthy criteria. There's still a real hunger for people stories. We want to know about April. We want to understand her background. How did you get to where you are? I think that I really want to advocate for more publishers like you, April, is like stand your ground and say, hey, this is what we stand for. And the community will come and support you. The primos will share the story and the links because we want good news, no matter what the clicks show. You have to think about too, like, well, who's clicking that and what are they looking for there? So yes, thumbs up all the way, April. Keep telling those really important people stories because you're highlighting the real individuals, the real small businesses and what that looks like in our community versus the same folks who always get the trophies, that always get the awards, that always get the coverage in time. So I love that. I ask that more of our content creators out there really focus on this as we go forward to really showcase humanity and all that's possible for people. Well, April, as I mentioned before, you are certainly influential yourself and cover topics as a social media influencer at times. So how does that area of mass communication impact your audience growth or engagement on the endeavors you do?
Well, my social media platform as an influencer, because I have two, I have the publications and then I have my own. It's definitely changed. I know you and I have known each other for quite some time. I'm sure you've seen that. I share what I do as a Latina publisher, what I do serving on these boards and organizations and events and career days and whatever. And what that's done is provide my audience with the mindset of, you can do it too. Here's a Latina that looks like me from my neighborhood, and she's doing all these things. For me, that's what it does. Also, a lot of it is the relationships that I've built. I'm very big on sharing, who I either interview, like I mentioned, the boards that I serve on, things that I'm doing. Sometimes you'll occasionally see my family because I am a real person and I have a family life. But I think that's how it's impacted my audience growth. I've just been myself, sharing all the things that I'm doing as a Latina, as a business owner, as a publisher, all the many hats that I wear in the city or throughout the US, because I still have a US travel section attached to my publication. So I do travel all over the place for that. But I think that's what's been it, just myself and highlighting all the things that I'm doing.
Yeah, I love it. What I hear from that is the power of representation, which is absolutely come through in every season of this podcast, is how much each one of our stories matters, because even if we don't think it's a big deal or grandiose, like there's a part of it that people can relate to, and that's inspiring. Hearing relationships and how important that is and that natural growth of it and both that win-win scenario. And then, of course, like authenticity, that April is who April is. I will vouch for that and say you've been the same person in person as online as via email, right? And I think that people really respond to that. So those are really important parts to highlight for everyone here.
That's a very big compliment, Melissa. Thank you for that. And I have heard that numerous times when I meet people in person. Yeah. They're like, you're the same as you are online. You're the same as when I've watched you speak or when you're on the radio and I'm like, what does that mean exactly? I mean, but I know, you and I, we're around people all the time and you see a certain persona online and then you meet them and it's like a completely different person.
Right.
So yeah, no, that's not me. That's too tiring. There's only one of me.
That's right. I'm in the same camp for sure, as they say, because it is much too tiring to live two lives and be two-faced, and people wonder which are they going to get on which moment of which day. So I'm with you on that. Well, April, now you're even hosting a radio show on top of everything else. So what does your work in radio tell you about how people use the radio these days?
People still like listening to the radio, whether it's driving to work or, driving somewhere with the family in the car. They still listen to the radio because at first when I started with the station, I got some feedback from people that I've known for a while. And they're like, nobody even really listens to the radio. And I'm like, I do. I mean, you can't always be on the phone or listening to Pandora or Spotify. Either you want to hear what's going on in your city. Now there's talk shows and, even commercials. Like that's what we grew up with. That's the media we grew up with. But my work in radio, it tells me that people are still wanting to be engaged with media outlets. And I don't mean social media. I mean the radio, TV. They still want to connect with people who are on air.
Yeah, I've really noticed that too. I remember teaching a mass communication class at a college, and the textbook had just come out a few months before. And the chapter was about iHeartRadio and what their situation was, and then they're bankrupt and blah, blah, blah. And by the time we were discussing it in class, I'm like, well, that's not what's happening anymore. And please forgive me if I didn't get that right, iHeart. But to that point is that it's evolved as well. And particularly since you've got journalists like yourself, however you identify, right? Content creators, radio hosts, whatnot, that can be on multiple platforms to kind of share and leverage that content, leverage that audio, leverage the in-person time with someone and tell the story a little bit on social or on video. I think it's got a second life in some ways. And I predict, as a public relations person that really studies how people think and move and act, that the louder things get on some of our digital channels, on social and whatnot, the more voices we hear that we're not sure we can trust. I think that people are really going to get closer to some of our traditional mediums and say, you know what, I trust that this radio station has hired somebody of some kind of credibility more than maybe when I just run into somebody online. So let me go ahead and listen to that. And you're right. If I'm listening to my playlist, I'm running into the same songs that I curated. And it's probably like, depending on the playlist, like 30 songs. And so I'm like, okay, I'm tired of those. But to get something fresh or new, you turning on the radio station and see, well, what else is going on? Or, oh, I forgot about that song. Or, you know what, I really like this personality. It means a lot. My husband has jumped back into radio listening and got my kids involved too. He's really into a radio host called T-Bone here in San Antonio. And T-Bone's Prime Cuts, I think it's on our San Antonio College radio station. Forgive me, I don't remember the call letters. But T-Bone plays some throwback music that reminds him of his father who passed away. And it's really special to him. And he's kind of followed T-Bone's journey and story of, coming back on air after being gone for a while. So yeah, connecting to the person behind the mic is a big deal. And I think that's what we miss from some of the digital playlists we may curate on our own. So kudos to you for getting back on that mic or getting on that mic and, growing your community and the appreciation for the medium that way. I think that's really a big deal.
I think that when people tune into my show or they run into me in person and I actually listen to them, they can feel more comfortable that you're a normal person like them trying to make things happen. And you're dealing with, your personal lives and the business world and all that, right? So I think that's just being yourself and staying true to what you believe in and just kind of having that with you when you're in media. That's success to me. because you can sleep well at night and you inspire people. And sometimes when it's guests on my show, especially, sometimes because they have me there, right, all to themselves, they'll ask me off the wall questions and it's live. There's no editing or anything. And I've been pretty lucky that everyone's asked me nice questions, but it's always a good time. I'm enjoying the radio part of my journey.
Yeah, and I think if you use a little humor, you can bridge over those awkward moments a little bit better and just make them funny. And that's what people really, really want these days. That may not show up in all the clicks, right? We love novelty and we love fun and we want to feel good. So I think that's really important that you offer that. So April, our industries are changing a whole lot. We need to evolve with them and kind of move with what's trending in some ways and then hold steadfast to what's fundamental and is always good for our communities and our work. What advice do you have for pros who may want to explore creating content for a niche audience?
First of all, my biggest word of advice is to stop looking at everyone else. There's great content creators, social media influencers that are doing the same thing because they saw someone create something that took off and became viral. That doesn't mean that if you do the exact same thing, that's going to happen. And I think in order to really figure out what your niche is, because I see this a lot, I'm sure you do too, content creators, they don't know what their niche is. They're just looking at everyone else and kind of bundling ideas off everyone else instead of doing the opposite, not looking at what everyone else is doing online or on social media and really digging deep within themselves to figure out what maybe their purpose in life is, or what's important to them, or what they feel that is being lacked as far as being shared, whether it's community, restaurants, businesses, events, whatever it is. If you really look into yourself and what you believe in, what your values are, what you love doing, you can find your niche that way. But you have to avoid all the trendy stuff. And I think when you have that wow factor, I think that's when things take off.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's really important that we stop jumping on the next very busy train that goes by and says, well, everyone's doing that. I need to do that. And sometimes that's hard to do, April. I know myself, you feel that pressure to be everywhere as a content creator or as a thought leader or someone who's a public relations representative and supporting clients and holding true to like, look, each digital community has its own culture. Each channel has its own culture, and there's nuances and there's ways to behave and ways not to. And what works with one community may not work with another. And it's okay for you to really focus and prioritize your time, your effort, your attentions, your monies. That's all really important for us to do strategically, but there's a pressure to just get very noisy and be everywhere. So I like that you highlight that. And in particular, when we're thinking about niche audiences, I think there's always been a power of a very deep, engaged relationship with your community. Them knowing who you are, what you stand for, what you offer them, and that you'll consistently deliver on that. And so that does align with what are your values and what is your pattern of behavior and the opportunities that you bring others in terms of the business world or in the entertainment world, right? And one and the same sometimes. But point being is that being authentic and honest about, look, we can't all serve everyone. So who do we serve best? And who are we a fit for? And who's a fit for us? That's an important piece of evaluation in our journey.
I think that if you stay true to your niche and all your values and whatnot, I think that attracts the right audience, whether it's just a social media platform for fun or a business. I think that if you just keep being yourself, it'll attract the right people, the right audience.
Yep, absolutely. So April, I love to ask all my guests this because part of what I'm trying to put out there and attract is really good conversations of deep importance at times. But what does smart talk mean to you?
Smart talk means to me a conversation with a purpose, have conversation with a strategy. And speaking from being a business owner, being in media, all my conversations are with a purpose. It's either to tell a story, it's to bring light to something amazing going on in my community, or to highlight individuals that deserve recognition. So Smart Talk to me is having a conversation with purpose.
I love that. With purpose, on purpose, right, April?
That's right.
Awesome. Well, April, this has been so enjoyable. And I know you probably have a lot of new fans from this episode alone. So what's the best way for listeners to connect with you?
Well, you can Google me. All of my stuff will pull up. But the best way to connect with me is on livefromthesouthside.com. All of my social media platforms are on there. And of course, the publications on there and our email address. So I'm pretty easy to find. If you run into me at an event, don't be afraid to say hi.
I love it. I sure will. Well, thank you, April, for sharing all your knowledge with us today.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Thanks to our listeners for joining me for today's episode. If you like Smart Talk and strategic comms, let's collaborate. You can work with me as a trainer, a consultant, or hire my firm, MVW Communications, for strategic comms planning or PR strategy services. My book, Smart Talk, Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know, is available on Amazon in print or audio and offers advice, how-to tips, tools, and new PR models so aspiring and practicing pros are equipped for this evolving field. Please follow and rate this podcast if you're a fan, and follow us at MVW to get the latest on trends, trainings, and more. And as always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit mvw360.com. That's mvw360.com.